If you like the video, then please consider supporting Slopes Game Room on Patreon.
I wanna take you for a ride.
We all have the ability to start a crowdfunding campaign, the ability to make a video and sell our brilliant idea to the world. And although sometimes that works out pretty great, other times not so much. And today we're going to go back to my Kickstarter roots with board games. I said it before and I'll say it again. I am a big fan of Euro type board games and I spend a lot of my time actually looking them up on Kickstarter. And thankfully every game that I have backed has actually been not only successful, but pretty much a perfect example on how to run a Kickstarter campaign. One of those examples is Saloon Tycoon and his expansion. I've mentioned this before, I backed both of these bad boys, and although the odd slip up did obviously happen, the games came in a good, timely manner. And let's be honest, that's what it's all about. You're not just backing something to get the end reward. After all, it's likely to be about 10% cheaper when it eventually comes out in the shops. But what you are also backing is the project for the experience. You want to see it when a company gets something wrong and how they fix it. You don't mind if it's a little late as long as the product pretty much is what they promised from the beginning and they've taken you along for the journey to your doorstep. Kickstarter is a brilliant platform that actually, when used correctly, gives you so much more than the final product. It's stuff like this that makes me a fan of the platform, and stuff like this that makes me say, oh, come on. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be looking at another 5 examples of stuff like this. Hi everybody, my name is DJ Slope, and this is 5 failed Kickstarter board games. Welcome to Slope's Game Room. This one is a bit of a toughie. Basically, the only thing left on the campaign is this, and sadly both the Wayback Machine and Google Cash wasn't able to help me. However, by looking at several other websites, I was able to pull together enough information regarding one of the most blatant obvious rip-offs I have ever seen in the campaign's short 5-day life. So, you know what this one's ripping off, right? Jumanji. Come on, say it with me. Jumanji. Yes, Jumanji. Now, sadly for this video, although thankfully for anyone stupid enough to fall for a campaign like this one, the campaign's video is gone too. Although after looking at comments over on Reddit, it seems that it was only 30 seconds of a chameleon chilling out and the campaign would have been better without it. There is this small little gif that someone saved of the pieces actually moving, but there isn't really much else to show except for the absolutely abysmal imagery. What we do know is that this horrific 5-year-old coloured in wooden box wasn't the only thing up for grabs, as 3 people actually dropped £50 for the casual version, which I can only assume is a standard cardboard version, but crazier still, 5 people actually put a serious amount into this to buy this awful looking fake at a cool £500. The campaign got £2,732 by 21 backers by the time it was taken down, and if it was able to hide in the shadows from Sony Pictures for the remainder of its life, it had every possible chance to have actually hit its goal. That is, if those backers were not snipers, just pretending to fund it to get this guy's hopes up. Either way, those backers lost all hope until he ripped off Jumanji once again with Ouija, another campaign that obviously failed and not only looks horrific but never actually gave any real information as to what the game was about or how it was going to play. And what's this? For £350, not only do you get the game, but ooh, you cheeky monkey. Honestly, I don't know why I'm talking about this one. It just makes me very, very sad. But if I didn't mention it, I know I'll end up getting 1,000 comments saying, "You forgot about Evil Dead 2 and the Terminator game, Dan." Actually, that would work wonders for my algorithm, so yeah, forget you heard anything. Okay, I'll take a look at it. So, Space Goat Productions needed $70,000 for the Evil Dead 2 board game and $120,000 for the Terminator board game, which they obviously smashed. Why wouldn't they? The fan base on these two movies are absolutely ridiculous, and honestly, I am very much part of both of these groups. Well, okay, maybe not as much as this guy, but anyway. As you are hearing me talk about the games, you can pretty much guess that they didn't make it into the backers' hands. Evil Dead 2 is well overdue now, as it should have shipped back in July 2016, and the Terminator, not as bad, but still definitely should have shipped in February 2017. But not only did 8,000 backers sit and wonder what the hell was going on, but they also started to see more excuses in between fewer and fewer updates, a drastic drop in communication from the company, and of course a serious drop in social media posts. Well, this continued all the way up until about May the 1st, 2018, when a backers only update was posted and was quickly reposted back on those Board Game Geek forums. Turns out that they wanted even more money. We found there is a first for this show, and Space Goat Productions used it in an attempt to help raise even more money in their dying company, which they didn't get. Thank God. The whole thing was a mess. They asked for a decent amount of money, gained practically $1 million originally, and still wasn't able to offer anything, leaving the final update on both campaigns from the CEO saying, "Dear backers, with the apparent failure of the equity crowdfunding campaign, we have taken a step back to regroup and consider a number of options. Some paths forward have been presented to us. We need a few weeks to find the best path forward. As soon as we find the best path forward, you all will be the first to know. Sincerely, Sean Burry." There you go, I mentioned it. Next one.
Hello everyone, my name is Nathaniel Malley, and this is an introduction video about my Kickstarter and what I'm trying to accomplish with my Kickstarter. So, this Kickstarter, the one that I'm making this video for right now, is actually a Kickstarter to get me to another Kickstarter.
Whoa, hold up. We're only about 18 seconds in and every single alarm is going off. Apart from that one backer that pledged £109 of a, £17,000 goal? Bloody hell. Okay, so let me break this down for you. What you're actually backing here isn't a board game, but instead it's enough money to give to poor old Nathaniel here so that he can actually start a board game business. He's already made progress on the game 3 years ago, and now it's time to start it up again. Or as he puts it, I need to set up the foundations of all the business outlined. This way the game can be successful while eliminating any potential issues with legality, theft, and production failure. Right, okay. Obviously the Kickstarter got taken down by Kickstarter themselves, and the only backers willing to put money towards this mess were people giving good constructive criticism like, "You need to have an actual idea posted for anybody to really want to back you. I pledged and I'm going to remove my pledge until I see an actual idea posted. If it's a good idea, I'll back you. Until then, I want to say good luck. Oh, and of course, you suck." Fair play. This bloke deserves it. So the overly long campaign video goes into more detail why he needs the money, bringing up how he needs to hire lawyers and artists to help bring the game he started several years ago to life. But when it comes to actually talking about the board game itself, again, don't forget you're going to actually need to back his second Kickstarter if you actually want to get that, it becomes very, very vague. He doesn't tell you the title, but does explain it's slightly fantasy based with a hint of ancient mythology and religion mixed in. It will feature dwarves, elves, and humans, and will have different races and species.
I don't want to really go into too much on that quite yet.
So, I ask again, what the hell is the point in making a Kickstarter, you idiot? This nonsense goes on explaining the amount of players in the base game and deluxe game, but not really sure just yet. You can play against one another, 2v2, 3v1 cooperatively, single player like in the game, and even going to include another 2 games built right into it. Look how happy he is with that little fact.
And I don't want to go into, I can't really give you the title or the content. I don't want to really go into too much on that quite yet. I really, really wish I could go into more detail. Having said that, I don't want to go into too much detail with that, but it's really a brilliant idea.
This drivel goes on for quite a while until he starts to explain that the game will also be a mobile application as well as an Xbox download, a PlayStation download, a bloody book series. He explains that the whole reason for this was due to a move to his parents after his girlfriend left him and he lost his job. He began to download loads of mobile phone apps to pass the time and nothing really caught his interest. Anyway, moving on, in an attempt to make friends, he went along to a local board game night and played Settlers of Catan for the very first time, and just like me, he was blown away. The next 2 or 3 days were spent constantly creating his own heavily inspired Catan board game, and after showing his friends who gave it a thumbs up, he gave up and went back to work, and a couple of years later discovered Kickstarter, and boom, here we are. TLDR, guy got bored, discovered Settlers of Catan, designed his own game, made a Kickstarter with a 15-minute video telling you that story, and never actually told you anything about the game itself. So, what's left? Well, let's be clear, there was actually nothing to begin with, and after checking out the guy's social media platforms, it doesn't look like he's done anything with the board game project for about a year, and has instead gone back to selling BMWs. Oh, how the below average have fallen. Here it is, guys, the big one. Hope you're sitting comfortably. You're in for a bumpy ride here. In fact, before I even show you what, or more importantly why, Upfront exists, it's best that I do not dilly-dally, but instead it's best I do that complete history thing and go back to the beginning. This is Phil Sir. When looking up his personal profile over on BoardGameGeek.com, which is where the majority of this segment's information comes from, you can see that he is very much a heavy board game enthusiast. He has plenty of qualifications under his belt, and from what I can tell is a rather trustworthy guy. Anyway, in 2010, Phil decided to get out several loans to help the reprinting of several Valley Games board games. In his words, he gave $64,750 to reprint 5,000 copies of a game called Stronghold. He gave $48,000 to reprint 5,000 copies of Liberty, $43,000 to reprint 5,000 copies of Master Builder, and finally $31,000 to print 5,000 copies of 2x2. And as I'm bringing them up in this video, you may have guessed that Valley Games had not paid Phil back. The deal was not only to pay him back, but to also give him a little snippet of the sales on each of the games. Seemed like a pretty easy deal, to be honest, but for whatever reason, Valley Games a whole 2 years later had only managed to pay off a small portion of those loans, even though it was pretty obvious that the games were indeed selling. Phil even gave details on the minimal profits expected on each of those games too on a post back on those Board Game Geek forums. And if you think that's bad, this is where it gets even worse. You see, Valley Games are a company based in Canada, and back in Kickstarter's earlier days, you wasn't able to start projects outside of the States. So, you guessed it, Valley Games decided to discreetly start a second company called Radiant Darkstar Productions in Texas. And after selling plenty of games, they created the main Kickstarter that you are all here to see. Upfront.
Welcome to Radiant Gaming's Kickstarter project, Upfront. Upfront is an exciting, tactical level game that recreates man-to-man combat in World War II. Designed for 2 players, each player has a squad of men and a particular objective to accomplish. The game action and its resolution is driven by the action deck. Let's take a look at a turn of a game already in progress.
Yeah, the video is incredibly boring, but this was the earlier days of Kickstarter, and obviously there is a big market for games like this. In fact, this is a rather old and, more importantly, a rather well-respected game. And according to Valley Games themselves, Radiant Darkstar Productions themselves, they actually got a go-ahead from the original authors to make this long out of print little board game gem. Updates were constantly brilliant almost every other day in some instances, showing up-to-date artwork and giving production statuses, basically just doing everything perfectly to keep the 2,407 backers that pledged $339,848 to bring the project to life. Oh, and by the way, they only needed $30,000 in the first place. Fair play, guys. But whilst it was all honky-dory over here, back on Board Game Geeks, concerned forum posters were warning potential backers of the completely different lawsuit against the company from one Rina Knizia, who was actually sending in his lawyers as the company was supposedly publishing his game without giving the rights or possibly any loyalties for his game. As you would expect, it was at this point that people became very interested in this project, and that connection between Radiant Darkstar Productions and Valley Games started to become apparent, with plenty of proof to go alongside it. And on top of all this, proof of Phil. You remember Phil, that original loan lender? Well, he was taking the company to court too. You see, while all this was happening, Phil was still getting almost none of his loans paid back, and he was struggling to get a response via email and phone from Valley Games. So an even longer story, slightly shorter, who won the case? Phil won the case. Thank God. Valley Games never denied the allegations that they owed him a significant amount of money and confirmed that they would indeed pay him back the approximate $255,000 that they owed him. The only problem was, they didn't. Even after taking the company to court, Phil was still not getting the payments that he was owed, even though further proof was still coming in that plenty of Valley Games were still being sold. Look, we're just going to cut this whole mess down. I will leave an insanely detailed thread below if you do want to go dig in yourself. What was eventually proven was that the funds from Radiant, and not only one but eventually 3 different campaigns the company put out, is that money was getting funneled back to Canada to pay off the ever-rising legal fees and bills to Phil. And what does this mean for Phil? Well, after a long haul, it seems to me that he got paid. But what does this mean for the Kickstarter backers? Well, not a whole lot, because Rick is the guy whose name is all over this campaign, by the way, has literally taken the rest of the money and ran away all the way over to Australia. The comments section is left with angry backers, as you would expect. However, they're not just gunning for Rick, but they're also gunning for Phil too. The accusations go that Phil waited until he knew the company had enough money from Kickstarter before going ahead and suing. And some people think that the whole thing was planned between Rick and Phil. But obviously, the vast majority of hate goes directly to Rick.
I just want to maintain this thread by reminding people, and Rick, just how much of an asshole he truly is. He stole over $300,000 from people. $300,000! He has not yet come to justice through this illegal act, and he continues to live a nice life there in Australia. I know Kickstarter says you should be nice and respectful to people, but fuck you! He ripped people off! And Kickstarter hasn't done a goddamn thing about it. So fuck you, Rick, and screw you, Kickstarter, for not doing anything about it. I mean, Kickstarter got their cut, and they just turned a blind eye to this whole thing. Kickstarter is complacent and complicit and should be sued right along with Rick. Happy fucking holidays, Rick, you piece of shit. Okay. I'm better now. I just took my meds, so I'm feeling a lot better.
Let me start this segment off by asking the question, can you guys imagine just how much work building a board game must take? Well, long-time viewers of Kick Scammers will know that it is my eventual goal to release my own board game on Kickstarter.
I don't want to really go into too much on that quite yet.
Exactly. What I will say though is that the game is a sort of resource and building based game. I'm not saying these are easy to make, far from it. We've been working on this bad boy for years. Nope, not easy at all. However, I am sure that the hardest type of board game to create has to be these sort of co-op turn-based tabletop games full of miniatures and plenty of backstory and lore. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of these types of games, but these sort of games always show up on Kickstarter and oversized boxes completely dominate big portions of every single board game shop going. Obviously, they're very popular, and obviously, this was no different. Foxtail Studios were the guys bringing overturned Rising Sands to the table. And looking at the video, if I was into these sort of games, I probably would have backed it in a heartbeat. Great video production, a ludicrous backstory, and although it's not actually showing the real board game in action, it does show some pretty impressive renders of the game and the figures, which all look brilliant. On top of that, the game was the equivalent of about $89, which is crazy cheap for a game with this many figurines in place. It needed 45,000 Canadian dollars, and although it ended on $150,795 from 1,093 backers, before getting suspended from Kickstarter, at one point in its life, it gained over $350,000. So, what went wrong? Why did everybody leave this promising game, and why did Kickstarter kick it to the curb? Well, obviously when a project like this gets as big as it does, as quickly as it does, everybody starts talking about it, and it basically snowballs out of control. And that doesn't just mean more money, but it also means that people will be going out of their way to dig a little deeper. So the first issue with the campaign was the price. I already stated that the game will come with an insane amount of content inside the box for such a small amount of money. Well, small amount in comparison to other projects like the majority of Cool Mini or Not games, another popular and very reputable serial Kickstarter board game company. And like I said, those figurines shown in the rather impressive campaign video were just CGI renders of the final product. And although granted these are not the final products, well, they didn't look that good at all. The second big issue here was the fact that the company was simply lying about their location. As you probably know, Kickstarter wouldn't allow for projects outside of places like the UK, USA, etc. And these guys were based in Pakistan. The real issue, however, is plagiarism. Yes, plagiarism. Calm down, Philip. I'm not talking about you in this one. The real plagiarism for this section comes from the game's rulebook, which is almost word for word the same as Cool Mini or Not's Massive Darkness. Yep. Well, if you compare the Massive Darkness rulebook with this one, the similarities are not only similar in some places, but are completely ripped off word for word in others. But it doesn't even stop there. Just look at the company's logo. Recognize it? Hang on, let me just get this, and here we go, there. Here we go. Oh dear. Obviously, the more people that discovered this, the more ridiculous it got. And even though the company did put out a statement blaming their translator for it all, it didn't help. Cool Mini or Not CEO slapped the company down with a takedown notice, and Kickstarter themselves simply suspended the whole thing. Hey there guys, thanks for checking out the video. I want to give a big special shout out to all of my patrons, but first I want to give an extra big shout out to Alpha Omega Sin. Yes, that voice you heard was Alpha Omega Sin in the video. Thank you very much, buddy, for being a part of this one. I hope to work with you again very soon. But anyway, back to those patrons with a big special shout out going to That Retro Video Gamer, Ryan Burford, Gary Pinkett, Andrew Dalton, Tomek Grabowski, Christopher Turnbull, Aaron McNamara, Brent Craft, Ben Jackson, Ian A. Chapman, Phil Lowlins, Tim Lunn, Genovi, Video Game Basement, Hernandez, Retro to Next Gen, Pixels.limited, aka Samuel Victor, Red the Beard, John Fuller, Michael, Conrad, Constantine, Pretendo64, Mike Fallon, Gavin Gorvez, Creamy Elephant, James Loveridge, Casey Garner, Blitz Hedgie, Ben Hall, Brian Warson, Gemma Mr. T-Shirts, Jeremy Rodriguez, Nick Pollard, Brom Perez, Garrett Leger, Marcus King Emo Cut, Tyndall June, Rob Jenkins, The Geeky Dad, Richard Carter, aka Fantastic Dizzy, Todd Paul Flo G, and Betty Mew. If you want to be part of this list, get your name shouted out, get your name shown, come see what I'm working on, and all of that usual stuff, then please be sure to click the link that you see on the screen. Don't forget to subscribe, give it a thumbs up, a thumbs down, whatever you prefer. But for now, this is DJ Slope signing out, and hopefully I'll see you all next time. I'm gonna go and have a beer. Bye.